Hello, and welcome to the American Field Trip Podcast. We are back here at the end of the year with some thoughts on our year visiting a lot of fun national parks and historic sites.
This podcast is brought to you by LL Bean, our wonderful sponsor. We are repping right now. So this year turned out different from what we expected. We planned to spend 2 full months on the road and then do several shorter week-long trips. And then in March, I tore my ACL skiing and I had surgery in April. So there were about a good 2 months in there where I was not out of bed very much, and about 6 months where I was in physical therapy. David had a lot of work trips this year. And anyway, so things didn't turn out as expected in terms of how much time we were going to be on the road or sites that we saw. But we did see 30 national park sites this year. And we revisited 2 capital N, capital P national parks. Really just one, I think, counts. We went to Mesa Verde. We were very near, and we went to the visitor center and drove in a skosh, but I don't think it super counts. But we did spend a couple days at Great Sand Dunes, and that was phenomenal. So I'm going to read the list of ones that we went to in case you're interested. We finished up going to all of the Colorado park sites. We actually finished a few states this year. We went to all the sites in Colorado and all but one of the sites in Massachusetts, and that is because it was closed.
Boo. We went there, but we didn't
We
visit
went
it.
there, but we didn't check it off.
We took a picture in front of the sign.
Nothing happened. So we visited Florissant Fossil Beds, Bensold Fort, Sand Creek, Amachi. Those are all in Colorado. Lake Meredith, Alabates Flint. Did we? I know. I learned how to say that when we were there. Now I can't remember.
Alabates Flint Quarries? I'm pretty sure that's how I said it.
Alabates Flint Quarries. Washita Battlefields. Chickasaw National Recreation Area. Those are both in Oklahoma. Capulin Volcano National Monument, which is in New Mexico. Corricanti National Recreation Area and Colorado National Monument, obviously in Colorado. We went to Craters of the Moon, which counts as 2 sites because it is both a national monument and a national preserve. We don't know how it's counted. That's how the NPS counts it. So 1 place, 2 check marks. Minidoka National Historic Site, also in Idaho. And then we went on a trip to Boston with LL Bean. We went out to visit their headquarters in Maine, and we took a little extra time visiting all the Massachusetts area sites and Vermont and New Hampshire too, which only have 1 site each. So not hard to check off all the sites in those states. But we went to Boston African American National Historic Site, Boston National Historical Park, Roger Williams National Memorial in Rhode Island, Blackstone River Valley, New Bedford Whaling, NHP, Springfield Armory, St. Gaudens, Marsh Billings Rockefeller, Salem Maritime, Saugus Ironworks, Longfellow House / Washington's headquarters, Lowell, Frederick Law Olmsted, Adams National Historical Park, Boston Harbor Islands, and Minuteman NHP. We also went to JFK's house, but it was not open. And maybe that was my biggest disappointment because it was supposed to open, and it opened like a few days after we left.
We just missed it.
It was a bummer, especially because it is in a residential area in Brookline, Massachusetts, which is city, and that's going to be a hard one to go back to with any kind of trailer situation.
We'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen.
There's a big list for you. That's what we did. That's what we're submitting for our report card here at the end of the year.
Yeah. But we wanted to give you some best ofs, maybe a couple like worst ofs or
I don't think there are any worst stuff except for JFK being closed. That was a bummer.
Yeah, that was a bummer. But I guess just different things we love, different things that stood out to us. Mm-hmm. So our first category is sleeper hits. What is a site we visited that you would describe as a sleeper hit? Maybe when you had low expectations going in and then took you by surprise.
My sleeper hit for this year was Craters of the Moon National Monument, which is, I mean, it was funny to me because it's I think is it our closest national park site? It's very close to us. No,
it's not our closest, but it's very close.
It's very close to us. We live in northern Utah and it's in southern Idaho. So it's very close. We pass it a lot. It's always been on the list, but we've never made it happen. And this year we finally made it happen. And it was super, super cool. Really, really delightful. I was excited to go there, but I don't know. It's one of those sites that you go to and you know that like it could be a national park someday. Like it could get an upgrade eventually, and that would be no surprise at all. Like it was really, really cool. Really cool. Yeah, I don't know. What do you remember from our visit there?
I agree with that. We camped there. We were there for a couple of days. It's just really beautiful. We went in June, didn't we? Or July?
I think it was in June because it was still
summertime,
green.
But it wasn't super hot. Everything was really green. We've had a very green year in the desert out here in the West. So that was really phenomenal. And it was just really beautiful. It's my answer for a couple of things. So I'm going to talk about it.
We're going to be talking a lot about Craters of the Moon.
We really loved Craters of the Moon.
That was my sleeper hit. And I guess for those that don't know, Craters of the Moon is in Southeast Idaho, and it's a giant lava flow. It looks like Hawaii. Like if you've ever been to the volcano, to Haleakala or Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, really, really similar to that. Like the lava flows look like you are in Hawaii, but you're in Pocatello.
And what's weird about it is that they're so much older than flows that look the same in Hawaii because it's in a desert, it's very dry. And so the level of like degradation and also how quickly plants take over the lava and kind of are able to like repopulate is so much slower. And so you've got this really old lava field that still has nothing growing on it for a lot of it.
It's super cool. There's lava tubes, there's little like cinder cones. It's very, very, very cool.
Yeah, we did a hike in a lava tube, which was really cool. That was a standout hike for me this year. It's just surprisingly beautiful. Like I was expecting lava flows. I don't know why I wasn't expecting like that level of scenicness. Yeah, and it is just massive.
Southeast Idaho between Twin Falls and Pocatello is not an area of the country that I associate with scenic beauty. But
sorry,
anyone who lives in like Arco or it's beautiful in its own way.
It is.
Craters of the Moon is gorgeous. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Very, I mean, as the name suggests, very moon-like.
We also went to a cool bat program there. A lot of bats in there. That was super cool. Anyway, yeah, I agree with that. I really loved Craters. My sleeper hit was Capelin Volcano, which was kind of up in the corner of New Mexico. Big volcano. It was gorgeous, and I think because of the green year that we had, and we were there in early June. Yeah, it was just stunning. The scenery from the top of the volcano. You drive up, you can hike around the caldera there, and that was a gorgeous hike. And I wasn't expecting anything from that site only because I didn't really know anything about it going in. Yeah. There are a lot of these smaller sites that we just show up to that have the potential to really knock our socks off because we just don't know anything going in and we just have no expectations.
Yeah.
But that I remember as being one of my favorite views of the year. So
that's kind of why I like checklisty travel in general. Yeah. There's a lot of good arguments against checklist travel. But one of the fun parts of it is that you go to a lot of places that you wouldn't have planned to go to because it's on the list. You're going to go visit it.
Yeah.
And find a lot of cool places that you would not have found. And really end up enjoying them. Yeah.
That was for sure one of those for us because that's not a place you hear about a ton.
No, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but really beautiful.
Cool. Next category, best ranger program, David.
Oh, best. This one was kind of hard. There were a lot of really good ranger programs this year.
We did go to a lot.
We go to ranger programs whenever possible, and we suggest that everybody goes to ranger programs wherever possible. The best one. So for me, I'll say it was a toss-up. The honorable mention for me was at Alabate's Flint Quarries. Went on a really great ranger hike.
Yes.
And tour of the Flint Quarries. Had a great ranger. It was a really beautiful hike. Just everything you want from a great ranger program. Super interesting, facts, stories, great. Just good vibes, good hike, really fun time. That was my honorable mention. That was a good example of like a ranger program really making the visit for you. Because without that ranger program, there really wasn't much else at that site. Like it's a pretty small site.
Yeah.
It's to protect some archaeologic sites. that are like, they're like flint little pits. Like it's not actually visually that much to look at. Like they're small, very geologically and sort of historically significant, but it's not like Mesa Verde or something.
Yeah, the story is what makes it cool.
Yeah, and the story is super fascinating, super cool. So that's honorable mention. My main one though was Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park, and this one is like Marsh-Billings Rockefeller is interesting. It's in Woodstock, Vermont. The sort of formation of the park and how it's been, built and maintained is interesting. But we went during their annual Forest Festival, which, if you can go, it was fantastic. It was super, super cool. That we're going to be talking about that Forest Festival in a few items in our episode here.
And shout out to me because I like
Maddie found that and planned around it.
Well, our Boston trip, we really planned around ranger programs. We did not go according to like the shortest drive times. A lot of those parks are not open every day of the week, so we had to figure out when we could hit what. And then we planned to hit a ranger program at every single site that we visited out there. And I think that was the best decision that we could have made.
Yeah.
Especially for a lot of historic sites. Planning around ranger programs I think it really levels up the experience so much. The Forest Festival was an example of that. For Marsh-Billings Rockefeller is a cool site that is made infinitely cooler when you can. Well, tell them about some of the activities we did.
Yeah.
You were going to, and then I had to give myself props.
Yeah. Well, deservedly. So Marsh-Billings Rockefeller is a farm. So it's kind of two parts. There's a working farm that is not maintained by the National Park Service. It's maintained by a nonprofit just there in Woodstock. And it's a working farm that you can go and tour. It's made for, talking about farming practices of that time period, and is a super fun visit if you are in Woodstock, Vermont. I mean, if you're going to go to Marsh-Billings Rockefeller, definitely go to the farm also. Like it would be weird not to. But the where it is in Woodstock, there's kind of in the valley, there's this farm, and then across the road, there's Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historic Site. I don't know. It's historic something.
The naming is all.
The naming's weird. And then there's a visitor center there, and then there's a home the home that was owned by Marsh-Billings and Rockefeller, I believe. Was it all of them, or did Billings build it? There's three names to this site because three sort of prominent people owned this piece of farmland. Most notably, Rockefeller. At the end, it was one of the Rockefellers who donated it to the National Park Service to become a historic park. But the cool thing is that it's a big forest, and I guess was it Billings? Was it Billings that had these sort of regenerative farming practices? And I don't know. Vermont was like, we
need to touch up on our story.
We need to fix our story. But basically, the sketch here is that Vermont was like clear cut. There were no trees. And then they came back and replanted the forest, and it grew into this like beautiful forest, which is there now.
Billings, who was a railroad magnate, I believe, in California, was like an early California millionaire. He was really inspired by the forestry practices of Marsh that Marsh had written about. So he went back and bought Marsh's childhood farm and reforested it.
Yeah.
But the ranger programs we did there.
The ranger programs were varied and super cool. I think as part of the Forest Festival, the Forest Festival, they say is kind of to celebrate the logging practices in the park. So they have an active forest management program in the park. I think it's either the only or one of the only National Park Service run sites that has like active like timber, like cutting, they log and sell the timber.
I think it's the only one where that is like a mission of the site.
It's to preserve sort of historic logging practices. They log with horses, and it's sort of to preserve traditional logging like practices and techniques and things. So the rangers there that maintain the forest, they, pull logs out with horse teams, and they do demonstrations.
So we got to see that.
Super cool.
We went on a hike on some of the carriage roads with an Abenaki guy from the local area who taught us about the origins of a lot of English words and how they come from the Abenaki language, which was really, really cool. And then they had a kind of a festival in one of the fields there where they had lots of things for the kids to do. There was a guy with a lathe that was like helping the kids make walking sticks. And is that a lathe?
No, it was lathe. He had just you could whittle a walking stick. He had like a draw knife and was sort of cutting down sticks so the kids could make walking sticks. You could decorate them. They had people demonstrating like traditional furniture making and wood carving techniques. It was all sort of orbiting around wood. So they harvest the timber and then make a whole bunch of stuff out of the timber. And so they had a lot of local craftsmen coming to do little programs and demonstrations. There was like a band there. They had
basket weaving. We did a tour of the house, which was also fun.
Really, really just like awesome. Just like a fun day.
It was a really fun day. And then had the greatest soft serve I've ever eaten at a little ice cream place in downtown Woodstock.
Just maple soft serve. It was really good.
It was phenomenal.
Really good. If you go to Woodstock, go get the maple soft serve.
It was so good.
Worth it.
So my favorite ranger program, that whole day was definitely up there. A couple others. Alabate's Flint Quarries was also on my top. I think it was a volunteer, not a ranger, that did that walk with us. She was phenomenal. Had such great stories. And couple other ones. Minuteman National Historical Park in Lexington and Concord. We had a ranger there that just like knocked it out of the park with his storytelling.
He was a real performer.
Oh, it was so fun though. It was really, really fun to hear him tell the story. So that was great. Saugus Ironworks was very cool.
Oh man.
Because they have all of this stuff running from the original Ironworks. They'll start it up for you if you're on a ranger program.
When you hear Saugus Ironworks, the first thing you think is probably not, wow, that's going to be like a really fun afternoon.
It really was.
It was awesome.
The rangers were super dynamic, and then they start the water wheels for you so you can see kind of the whole process of what they're doing. They don't have like the fires going, but they showed how everything's powered and but that is all.
They work the fires still. So it's like a full working. They don't run the furnace, like the giant furnace thing that they have to like refine the ore, but the water wheel still works. They maintain that. They have all of the stuff, like the mill equipment that they use to refine and shape all the iron that they were making there. Still works, and they still like use it.
And this was early mid 1600s that this was running.
Yeah. It's not original. They rebuilt all of it.
Yeah, but it's very, very cool to see how that was all going.
If you're at all interested in like early industrial technology, a real cool visit.
Yeah. So that was a top one for me. And then also New Bedford Whaling Museum. We had another volunteer there that was super dynamic. She was fantastic. We did a walking tour of the city. We learned a ton about whales. We learned a ton about the history of New Bedford. And that program really made that site for me like one of my tops. And I'll talk about that later. But it was that was really cool. Lots of fun whale facts. And she really catered it to our group too. And the fact that there were we had little kids with us, and that's just go to ranger programs. They're the best. Yeah. Our next category is Best Visitor Center.
Best Visitor Center. There were a lot of good visitor centers. You go first. Tell us about your favorite visitor center.
So my favorite visitor center was probably Minidoka, which is the site of a Japanese internment camp in Idaho. Another one that's very near us. It's in Jerome. Is that right?
Is it? I don't think it's in Jerome. It's near Twin Falls.
Near. So this was a newer visitor center, and they had one of the best movies I've ever seen at a visitor center. It was incredibly impactful. They had a lot of survivors speaking. They had a lot of first person accounts. And then it was new too. It was all new. Yeah.
Narrated by George Takei.
The movie was very new.
Amazing movie.
The visitor center, the site is, there's not a ton to see at the site. I mean, you can see the barracks, you can see where things were, you can see the baseball fields that they built there, that the prisoners built there. But for the most part, I felt like the visitor center itself was really the heart of our experience. Yeah. And watching that movie, I mean, it was super duper impactful.
And just a beautiful, like, really thoughtfully designed visitor center.
Yeah.
Architecturally, it was really beautiful. And it was just opened like a couple of years ago. It's new.
Yeah, I would recommend a visit there to anybody. And it was great with the kids. They learned a ton. We'd been learning about Japanese internment. And anyway, it was really made the experience. And then the other visitor center I wanted to shout out was Bensold Fort, which is a reconstruction of a fort that was on the Santa Fe Trail.
Yeah.
This was a fort during the early 1800s. A lot of people are coming west. But what was cool about the fort was that it was all, it's reconstructed so that you can see the things that would have happened there. So they had really done a nice job of setting everything up in kind of a historical fashion. And that was another good ranger program, that tour of that fort.
Yeah, is a lot like a lot of the other good fort sites where they have like little demonstrations. People are wearing like period costumes.
It's like the whole site is basically a visitor center. Yeah. So I guess that's why I liked it.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
My favorite, besides Minidoka was a real standout. My favorite was Olmsted National Historic Site in Boston, which is the home and studio of Friedrich Law Olmsted, which was really cool. So I'm a designer, so I was kind of design nerding out in just like a really old design studio. It was one of the earliest professional design studios. It was landscape design, so like landscape architecture and landscape design, but was just really cool. It was, they had old material that they used to make blueprints, old cyanotype material, like a really old, basically photocopier machine that they had. And most of it was just kind of intact as it was. They had like a huge archive of all of the plans for all of the projects that the firm did. So, all the plans for Central Park, all the plans for Prospect Park, and all of the other sites that they did across the country. They gave a lot of information about early conservation efforts just because Olmsted and his firm were so instrumental in early national parks and in the landscape design of early national parks. He was really wrapped up in a lot of early conservation ideas and early ideas about public lands. So really, like, it was a convergence of all of my nerdy interests, like public land, conservation, design, history. Is kind of everything at once. So.
And another
small
one
site,
where,
but very cool.
Another one where the site is the visitor.
Yeah.
The visitor center is the site.
Yeah,
they've done a really good job with it, and that was another cool tour as well. What was your favorite historic site? That's our next category.
My favorite historic site, Saugus Ironworks, was really, really cool.
It was really cool,
just because of all of the demonstrations that they did. This was one where I don't think there were a lot of original buildings, if I recall correctly. Most of the stuff has been reconstructed, and how they found where the Saugus Ironworks was kind of a funny story. A guy had to come and like dig around and find it.
Find all the tailings, right?
They found the tailings, and then that sort of showed them where the rest of it was, and they discovered some remnants of some of the buildings, and from that kind of extrapolated and reconstructed it. But really, that one was a cool kind of living history experience, where we spent a lot of time in Boston going to kind of Industrial Revolution sites, and, Lowell was a big Industrial Revolution site, a lot of things talking about, changing technology and things that changed industry. And that one just was so cool because it was so real, and they did such a cool job of demonstrating it. They fire up the thing, you get to see it all work. You just experience it as much as you can. That was really cool. That's kind of my favorite type of historic site, is where you really get to get very close to it and experience it. So Saugus really checked all those boxes. Saugus was really cool and was unexpected. I went into Saugus with no expectations. That was one of those ones that was like, it's on the list, so we're going to see it, but it's not one that, had it not been a national park site, I would not have sought it out. But having been there, super cool. Really cool.
Marsh Billings was one of my favorite historic sites. I think my very, very favorite was Adams National Historical Park in Quincy, Massachusetts. There's 3 sites that you kind of tour That was another. This should have been on the Ranger program list too, but I'm just going to conflate those two.
There were a lot of good Ranger programs.
This was a phenomenal Ranger program, a great storyteller of a Ranger that we had. And there's just a lot of history there. It's very well preserved. They has an amazing library where they told us a really cool story.
Who is the Adams that it is named for?
It is named for John Adams and Abigail
and John Quincy Adams.
and John Quincy.
The whole Adams clan.
The whole Adams family.
Settled and grew up there.
Yeah. And their story is really interesting. I feel like he's one of the founding fathers that you hear the least about. The park did an amazing job of preserving things.
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite places we went this year.
Yeah. It was a lot of, it's historic homes. I think it's 3 historic homes owned by various members of the Adams family. The founding father Adams family, not the like spooky Adams family.
Uncle.
And
it was just really well done. There's a lot of cool places. I liked it.
Great Ranger program, great facts, great experience.
Great. Yeah. What was your biggest surprise of your year?
Biggest surprise. I mean, I feel like I'm just talking about the same sites over and over. Saugus was a really big surprise. Craters of the Moon was a big surprise. Kind of not I mean, I knew Craters was cool. We've planned to go see it for so long, but then when we finally did go see it, it was still very surprisingly cool. I was really pleasantly surprised by what a great time I had there and the things that it offered that I did not expect. Just really beautiful scenes, amazing landscapes. Also, I think it was a little unique just because we had such a wet winter. We broke like all the snow fall records last winter. And so it was just green well into the summer this year. And it was super green there. Wildflowers all over the place. They said for them, it's a super bloom it didn't really look like a super bloom. Not a lot of blooms, but a lot of blooms, a lot of different wildflowers.
For Southern Idaho.
Yeah. For like black lava flows, there was a surprising number of really pretty flowers everywhere.
And I grew up very near there and have been past it and kind of around that landscape a lot. And it was, I think we visited on the prettiest year possible.
Yeah.
So
it was awesome.
So yay us. My biggest surprise was when we went to Great Sand Dunes National Park, the river was running.
Yeah.
When we went before, it was end of June.
I think so, yeah.
When we did our original parks trip, we went this year at the beginning of June, and the river was just
it was still going
flowing.
We did not expect it to still be flowing. We had not planned to sort of time our visit for the river
because it generally flows in the spring, and the spring is generally earlier in that part of Colorado.
Yeah.
But again, super wet year, tons of water, and so the river was flowing through. And that made that visit to Great Sand Dunes so cool.
Tell us about the river, though. What is the river?
The river runs at the base of the sand dunes. It has these things called surge flows, where it's like there are waves, like you're at the ocean, but it's just a stream. It's a very it's a unique feature of
it's
Great
a little
Sand
creek,
Dunes.
and it only normally it's just big sand dunes and there's no water there. It's very dry. But in the spring, when the snow melts, the snowmelt coming off the mountains forms this little creek that runs down the canyon and then across the sand dunes. So a lot of people come. It's a big draw. It's the busiest time at Great Sand Dunes is when the creek is running.
Because it's like being at the beach.
It's super cool. It's like being at the beach.
It was so fun.
In Colorado.
It was kind of chilly and windy on the day that we were there. It was just very windy on the day that we were there.
We were getting sandblasted.
Yeah, on the dunes. So we stayed mostly down by the water, but it was so fun to play at the water, and everybody was just in swimsuits and had their beach toys out, and it
just a unique experience.
Yeah, just in the middle of the Colorado desert, and it's I don't know. It was just really, really beautiful. And I was surprised that it was running and so excited that we got to see it. Yeah. And
that was just like a whoa, nature's cool kind of moment.
Yeah. It was really, really fun.
Yeah.
Top of your list to revisit.
Top of my list to revisit. Honestly, probably Craters, just because it's close.
It is
close. And I would just want to go back in different seasons. That's one of those places where the landscape is so unique and so interesting. And I like taking pictures of landscape so much that I like going back in different seasons. That would be mine. I think that would be an easy revisit for us because it's close, and that's a park that seems like it would bear a lot of revisiting. Like you could go in the winter and go in the summer and go at different times and see different things.
You can't get in very far in the winter, but
well, you go if it's not too snowy.
Yeah. My top revisit, one that I want to revisit, is Chickasaw National Recreation Area. Chickasaw was another sleeper hit for me. Gorgeous landscape. This is in Oklahoma, a state that our kids hadn't been before, so we had not passed through it on our original trip.
Yeah.
Chickasaw, what I liked the best about it was that there's a lot of like little swimming holes in the river there that were very cool. There's
a lot of springs,
a lot of beautiful hiking.
Used to be a national park. This is it's sort of an oddity like that. It was Platte National Park way back in the early days, and then was kind of de-national parked for a while. There's a couple of those in the history that were a national park and then weren't anymore. But this was one of them.
I think it should be again. It was super cute. But why I want to go back so much is because there's a lot of indigenous history around there that we didn't get to dive into as much as I wanted. And there's a lot of stuff in Oklahoma that I want to see and want to visit. Yeah. We also didn't really swim because there were a million people there, and we hadn't super planned for that.
We were there on a weekend, and it was hopping,
packed. But so it's a place I want to revisit, spend more time, go to some of the museums around there. And also we didn't go into Oklahoma City. I'd like to go to the Oklahoma City memorial of the bombing site there, which I've heard is very intense, but very worthwhile. Yeah. And anyway,
we got another trip to
so Oklahoma there's just a lot of stuff. There's that. So that's my top revisit. Yeah. Not as easy to get to. Best view.
Craters.
I've
already said enough about Craters, but Craters, it was beautiful.
Yeah. I think that's what I wrote down for my best view. We hiked to the top of Inferno Cone, and it was just very beautiful. Big views.
At sunset, it's gorgeous.
It was really, really nice. And our kids were like playing climbing trees. I feel like views are a lot better for me if our kids are in the view, like doing something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes
it's fun.
What do you think was the funnest site that we saw for the kids?
Marsh Billings Rockefeller, the hands down by a wide margin.
That was really fun.
That one was the Forest Festival was super fun. Even had it not been Forest Festival, the farm is really, really cool. The farm that is next to it is a big hit with the kids.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that you're emphasizing the farm because we didn't do the farm.
We didn't visit the farm this time because we had already done it. So we did the farm previously
in 2017, in the fall of 2017.
Yeah.
And it was gorgeous and it was super fun. And our kids were small and they loved it.
And the farm was great. But we, this time we spent the whole time at the Forest Festival because there were activities over there all day.
Yeah. And it's a little expensive we had like an hour and it's like $15 per person maybe.
Yeah.
And so we didn't want to pay to go in for a minute, but yeah. That one was super fun. I thought Colorado National Monument was really fun for the kids because the hiking that we did there involved a lot of rock climbing and scrambling. And anytime there's that, the kids love it. But also probably Craters, the lava tube that we did at Craters. They really loved that hike. But in Colorado National Monument, that's a gorgeous area. We haven't talked about it very much. But it's in Grand Junction, Colorado. It's one of the old ones, one of the old classic national monuments. And it was just beautiful. We did some great hikes there.
A lot of really short, big payoff hikes for kids.
Yeah, kind of Moab-y.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, the kids really enjoyed that one.
It's beautiful.
So yeah, I thought that was good. Did not meet expectations. Did you have any that you'd?
I mean, JFK was closed. That was probably the
JFK was closed.
Boston Harbor Islands for me was not the greatest. But that's mostly because of the circumstances of our visit. It was rainy. We had one day. We drove out to World's End, is what it's called, just because we were in that area. We were on that side of the harbor, and it was super rainy. It was pretty. It was cool, but it was wet. Yeah, so that one for me was like
very rainy. We got
very wet. It was wet.
And we had to go, that was a tricky one. If you're going to go visit Boston Harbor Islands, it's a patchwork of state and national park areas. There are ferries that run out to a bunch of the harbor islands, which is super cool. We just could not hit it on a day when there were ferries. And we weren't there during the summer when they run most of them. We were there in September. So a lot of service at sea. So we had to go to an area that you could drive to. We took a recommendation from a ranger at Adams National Historical Park, who sent us out to World's End, and it was gorgeous. But
it was a good tip for that day. It was the best that we could have done on that day.
It was just tough timing. That'll happen. For me, Salem Maritime. I kind of feel bad saying this.
Yeah, I can see that.
We've been to Salem a few times because we lived on the East Coast, and we had visited a couple weekends before Halloween once, and it was bananas. We went in September this time, and it was still bananas. That is just a busy place. We were there on a weekend, so that doesn't help.
Yeah.
But it was just
if you have kind of like a goth friend getting married, then
the
you
bridal
may go
shower
to
or the bachelorette events there.
You may go to a bachelorette party in Salem.
And there were a lot of those.
Lots of those.
Salem's great.
Like for real, a lot of bachelorette parties with matching shirts and stuff. It was a whole thing.
Salem's great. There's a lot going on there. I was excited to visit there because we had never focused on any of the sites that are preserved by the National Park Service, which mostly have to do with its role as a maritime port. And we did several ranger programs while we were there. The thing that kind of, I don't know, wasn't as great for me is that it's kind of hard to get around. There's a lot of traffic. The parking situation is difficult. There was construction on the ship that we wanted to tour, which, it is what it is. It's fine. Yeah. It was totally fine. And there's a lot of cool and cute stuff around there. But I just enjoyed some of the other sites in the area more, like Lowell and Saugus. And
there was better stuff in Massachusetts.
Salem is 100% worth a visit, but I would just suggest going on a weekday if you can, spacing your visit out away from Halloween. I don't know. And don't get donuts we got some terrible donuts there. The branding on the donut place was so cute.
It looked really cute, and it wasn't good.
They were terrible. So that was just, and then we got stuck in really bad traffic going out, and I had to go to the bathroom so bad. Everywhere we stopped, every gas station we stopped at,
nobody had a bathroom.
Nobody had a bathroom.
Or they had one, but they wouldn't let you use it. It was...
Anyway,
it was just it was kind of a lousy visit.
It was just like, I was excited for that site, and then I don't know. But Salem is adorable. I mean,
but also like, I don't know, what I wanted Salem to be was more like New Bedford whaling, where it's like kind of, maritime, and there's ships and nautical things, and it's, cute and historic. Salem's got that, but
it's really been taken over by the witch stuff.
It really has been. If you're into that, God, that's the place for you. They have pivoted hard.
And it's like interesting,
it's
and
cool.
It's fine. I did want to take a witch tour, but we didn't end up, like, the stars did not align for our timing in that. But I think
maybe that would have made the visit worth it.
Maybe that would have leveled it up.
I don't know.
Anyway. But yeah,
a lot of this stuff is pretty situational.
Yeah, it was, and it was just kind of a stressful visit.
Yeah.
So anyway, top three sites. These will probably be ones we've mentioned before.
Yeah. Oh, top 3 sites. I mean, the ones that I had, Craters of the Moon, I think was my top sort of outdoorsy one this year. Kind of like hiking, landscape, natural beauty focused. Craters was my fave.
Craters is one of mine too.
Marsh Billings Rockefeller was probably my favorite. Like, interpretive, historic one, that involved being near a cute town with good food and stuff. That was Marsh Billings Rockefeller. And Friedrich Law Olmsted, just because it was like convergence of all of my nerdy specific interests. I was the target audience for that park. It was really targeted at me.
For sure. And that one was a little tough with our kids.
They didn't love that one. I loved it though.
It's just very specific.
Yeah.
They did their best to have stuff for kids.
They don't care about blueprints and like
our
drafting tables.
Yeah, our 3-year-old was over it.
Quotes from John Muir and stuff.
You do what you can to raise your kids right, but sometimes it just doesn't take.
You can lead a horse to water.
So Craters was one of my top 3. Colorado National Monument was one of my top 3. It was beautiful. Can I sneak Great Sand? Great Sand Dunes was not
Great
a
Sand
new
Dunes is
one,
great.
but our visit there was phenomenal.
Oh, amazing.
This
And Great
trip
Sand
around.
Dunes is always a good time. That one's always worth a visit if you're
Yeah.
anywhere near there.
Yeah. And then New Bedford whaling was probably in my top 3 as well.
Cool.
New Bedford is the cutest.
So
the
cute.
Cutest.
So cute.
And big shouts to that volunteer. I wish I could remember her name because she really made our
She was
experience.
wonderful.
But yeah, the whole Boston area had so many cool historic sites. And I think what made this year of travel especially great for me was that even though it wasn't exactly what we planned and we kind of were pivoting, around what we could do with my mobility and yada yada. I loved that the things we were learning in our homeschool lined up really well with a lot of the sites that we visited. We've been learning about the time period kind of between like Queen Elizabeth and the Civil War, like that span for this past year.
Stuff.
So there was a lot of stuff in and around Boston, obviously, that's revolutionary time period, but also, the Industrial Revolution. There was just so much history that lined up with what the kids were learning. And so a lot of the books and things that we'd read went along with that. And I think that made the experience so much better. And then we were also learning a lot about westward expansion. So the stuff we saw in Colorado was also key to that. And it
was great.
It was great.
Yeah. That kind of happens as you visit more national park sites. They all kind of start tying together and you're like, oh yeah, this is like, this is another one that does this revolution, like industrial revolution thing.
I think also
like,
our kids are getting old enough to be able to make those tie-ins now. Like our oldest are 10 and 8 and they've been to a lot of sites and I think they're finally remembering things and are able to kind of make those connections.
It's a cool history curriculum.
They're fun ages to do historic sites, I will say. They're maybe on the little bit on the young side, but I think they are really aging into this historic site stuff and I'm excited because we've got a lot more to visit.
As long as there's a good ranger program. If you're just walking through a historic home, you'll lose them. Yeah. But get a good ranger program and they're there.
Anyway. So that was our 2023. We would love to hear if you visited any national park sites this year. What were your favorites? Have you been to any of the ones we mentioned? What did you love about them? Let us know. Share. Subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Instagram. You find LL Bean, our sponsor, if you are looking for some boots or some flannels. Anything cozy for the winter, for the new year. Wishing you a fantastic new year. And we'll be back with season 2 of the podcast in 2024.